it can be uplifting. That human connection that we create on the broadcast every night is incredibly important.
If it's important to our nation,
I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
it's on Face the Nation.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
I gave the order to take down these three objects due to hazards to civilian commercial air traffic and because we could not rule out the surveillance risk of sensitive facilities.
We're just putting so much more up into the atmosphere and space that we have to have a rigorous protocol to keep people safe.
We keep getting closer to default, but no closer to a Republican plan to lift the debt ceiling.
Court Judge Robert McBurney in Georgia issued part of a grand jury report about efforts by former President Trump and his allies to overturn Georgia's 2020 election results.
I don't think there could be two greater foils than President Trump and Governor Haley.
Welcome to a particularly busy Thursday, and welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Scott McFarland in Washington. We thank you for joining us. After days of calls for President Biden to speak about the unidentified airborne objects, the president addressed the nation about them today and said the unidentified aerial objects shot down this month were most likely tied to private companies and not to a foreign power. Meanwhile, in Georgia, the partial release of a grand jury report is giving us new insight into an investigation into former President Trump. They were looking into Trump and his allies' alleged efforts to interfere with the 2020 presidential election results in the state. And a key passage from that report reads, quote, "We find by a unanimous vote no widespread fraud took place in Georgia's 2020 presidential election that could result in overturning that election." To break down these two big stories, Weijia Jiang and Robert Costa join us tonight. Weijia is CBS News senior White House correspondent. Robert is CBS News' chief election and campaign correspondent. Let's begin with you, Weijia. What did the White House think the president accomplished or was trying to accomplish by speaking about this publicly today?
Well, as you mentioned, Scott, there was a lot of political pressure for the president to speak, not only from Republicans, but from Democrats who have said that he, because he is the commander in chief, should be addressing the American public about these objects that were shot down, because it's not every day that the U.S. Shoots things out of the sky. He did explain a little bit more about, what transpired that led to the three objects, not yet called balloons, to come down. And he said he was, taking the recommendation of his military advisors. He also, said that the radar had become better after that Chinese surveillance balloon hit the sky. So they were able to identify these objects that were probably, among several others. He said there was no reason to think that there was an increase in objects, which he also confirmed CBS's reporting that it was probably benign, weather balloon or something for commercial purposes. But he did make some news, Scott. He said that he wanted to take further action, some new policy to better track these objects. So he said that there would update the rules and regulations for keeping inventory of everything that's in the sky, and do a better job of that, as well as have the Secretary of State speak with other global leaders to talk about how they can really navigate the sky and keep record of things in the air, because there's not, so far, a universal way to do that.
Yeah, also this afternoon, Senator Mitt Romney had commented on this aerial phenomena, saying he's not so concerned about those three unknown objects, but about the Chinese spy balloon. Mm-hmm. President Biden addressed the issue of Chinese relations earlier today. Let's take a listen to what he said, then I'll have a question for you.
As I've said since the beginning of my administration, we seek competition, not conflict with China. We're not looking for a new Cold War, but I make no apologies, and we will compete. And we'll responsibly manage that competition so that it doesn't veer into conflict.
Weijia, from your reporting on this Paramount issue, where does the White House go from here on Chinese relations?
Well, I asked the president last week how that balloon incident, whether it would weaken relations between the U.S. and China, and he said no, because he had made it very clear to China what his intentions were before he was going to do it, and that this was the consequence of them invading U.S. airspace to begin with. But certainly this is not helpful for an already tense relationship, because China is at the center of the president's foreign policy, as we just heard there. Every decision he makes with regard to his international policies has to do in some way with China and being able to compete. And so I think that he had to take a firm stance and take that balloon down, especially given the political pressure. But Scott, we still have so many unanswered questions about that particular balloon. And it seems that new information is dripping out all the time, including when the U.S. first started tracking that balloon and whether it was intentionally flying over those military sites and what sort of data it actually collected. All of that is still under review for the final word. And so I think that will determine just how damaging the episode was. But certainly, it also shows how much more this administration wants to do to make sure they are fully aware of all the ways China is surveilling the U.S.
We have just a moment left, Ouija. It was the president's physical today, right?
It was, and we have been waiting quite some time for this, and he went to Walter Reed and had his physical. We're still waiting for the White House's note from the president's doctor, but he did speak publicly about this to a colleague here at the White House and said it went really well. So we are anticipating more details anytime, but right now we only have the president's own words to go by.
At the White House, Ouija Zhang, thank you very much. Let's take you now to Fulton County, Georgia. Outside the courthouse, Robert Costa joins us. So we got that grand jury report, a sliver of that long-awaited Fulton County grand jury report today. Bob, what was the big takeaway?
Scott, good to be with you outside the Fulton County Courthouse here in Atlanta, Georgia. We did get a sliver of what this grand jury is working on. We're still waiting to hear about all of its findings, all of its work that it's been doing now for over 7 months. But by a judge's order, the introduction and conclusion of a special grand jury's work, they were released today, as well as a section of the report detailing possible perjury, lying by witnesses who appeared and talked about former President Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Nobody was named in terms of the witnesses who jurors believe might have lied, but this is a new development in one of the most high-profile investigations in the country.
Up on the screen, Bob, we have that excerpt to which you're referring. It says a majority of the grand jury believes perjury may have been committed by one or more witnesses testifying before it. The grand jury recommends the district attorney seek appropriate indictments for such crimes where the evidence is compelling. This puts an awful lot of burden, perhaps an additional burden, on Fani Willis, the prosecutor in Fulton County. Any reaction from her office to this? We know she was trying to keep this all under wraps.
Fani Willis continues to investigate, and she has resisted releasing this report. She fought this proposed release of the full report, as news organizations, including CBS, have pushed for in recent months. And it remains to be seen what exactly she will do based on the special grand jury's finding. Will she convene a regular grand jury and issue indictments? We've spoken to legal experts in recent days, including a professor here in Atlanta, Clark Cunningham, who said he believes that former President Trump could be indicted in the coming months. It's certainly within the realm of possibility based on the way this partial report has been framed.
How has Trump world been reacting to this? This has kind of been an organic, evolving thing over the past year or so, and I suspect that he hasn't equivocated much on his thoughts. So what's been his reaction generally to Fulton County?
Scott, you've had such in-depth coverage of former President Trump and the scrutiny upon his conduct by the January 6th committee in the House. He always maintained he did nothing wrong during the course of that investigation. He has echoed that approach here in the Georgia special grand jury investigation, insisting he has done nothing wrong. He issued a statement today saying his name was not mentioned in this partially released report. But again, this report is only, as you said at the start, a sliver of what we know about something that has been operating entirely behind closed doors for over the past 7 months.
In Fulton County, Georgia, for us tonight, Robert Costa. Thank you very much. Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman has checked himself into Walter Reed Hospital to receive treatment for clinical depression. His office released a statement today saying Fetterman voluntarily checked himself in last night after conferring with a doctor. The statement says he's experienced depression throughout his life, but it became severe in recent weeks. Fetterman suffered a stroke last May during his Senate campaign in Pennsylvania. A new report from the Congressional Budget Office says if Congress doesn't act on the debt ceiling, the country could default on its debt. Democratic Senator Tim Kaine thinks he has a solution to the problem. He joins us next with an idea he says he got from Mitch McConnell. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today. I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was gonna be born, he was only gonna live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming racism.
I feel like it's just a war zone between all different races.
Will this generation continue the problem?
The kids pushed them away and didn't want them to be there because of their race.
Or be the solution?
We just need to keep raising our voices. We're all human and we don't deserve that type of treatment just because of how we look.
Are the kids all right? Racism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme, CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real, you'll have time to get prepared. Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression.
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, they are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
The news doesn't have to always be depressing.
What do you love about running?
It can be uplifting. That human connection that we create on the broadcast every night is incredibly important.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Scott McFarland. There's an impending issue facing the nation a deeply divided Washington will need to come together to solve. The Congressional Budget Office now estimates the country could be unable to pay its bills as soon as July if the debt ceiling standoff isn't resolved. Republicans have demanded attaching spending cuts to any bill that would lift the debt ceiling. Two Democratic senators, Tim Kaine of Virginia and Jeff Merkley of Oregon, think they have the answer to the issue. In a Washington Post op-ed published this week, they suggested going back to a proposal from Senator Mitch McConnell in 2011. They write, quote, his proposal allowed President Barack Obama to increase the debt ceiling subject to a potential override by Congress. They call it the McConnell plan and say it could take the weaponization of the debt ceiling off the table. Joining me now, Virginia Senator Tim Kaine. We thank you for your time, Senator. Explain how this works. It seems to be a role reversal where it's the president who raises the debt ceiling and Congress that gets to approve.
Scott, it's good to be with you to talk about this. And it is a little bit of a role reversal, but we actually think it's appropriate given the way Congress makes spending decisions. So as you know, the budget is for Congress, not the president. The budgetary powers are Article I congressional powers. And so we do budgets every year. We put them on the president's desk. The president does not have a line item veto. And so the president's always signed the budget. What our bill would do would basically say this: once Congress has debated and voted on a budget, the president should be able to raise the debt ceiling to cover the actions that Congress has taken and should have that power unilaterally. That would be consistent with the 14th Amendment, that the creditworthiness of the United States should not be challenged. If the president does that to cover the actions that Congress has taken, and Congress decides now it wants to disapprove it, then we could file a resolution of disapproval that would be debated and voted in an expedited way. But this would eliminate the brinksmanship that we've seen used over debt ceiling negotiations in the past. And as you indicated, it's based upon a proposal that Republican leader McConnell floated in 2011 when Barack Obama was president, and that's how we averted the crisis in 2011. We think it would be a good idea to make it permanently a part of the way we do business.
Well, Senator McConnell has said two particularly relevant things since. He said, first of all, that he was displeased with how much military spending was cut after the 2011 debt ceiling crisis was averted. But he also said unequivocally earlier this year that he thinks it's the House Republicans who need to come up with a plan, that Senate Republicans should stay out of it. So what's the next step to try to push this plan to somebody who could influence the results?
Scott, and I'll say this, if House Republicans say they would like to do spending cuts, and guess what, they have the path to do that. You don't have to do it in a debt ceiling discussion that would threaten our creditworthiness. We have the path because we do a budget bill every year. The Republicans control the House. So what they should do is they should write a budget, just like we're writing one in the Senate, and they should write a budget that reflects their spending priorities. What we would then do is put the House version and the Senate version together. We'd sit in a conference and we'd come up with a compromise. That's the way it gets done. In terms of how we might get this particular proposal in place, Senator Merkley and I floated this idea with Republican colleagues the last time we were up against one of these deadlines, but we were right up against the deadline, and some colleagues said, hold on a second, we're probably not going to take this up right now. But we have a few months, July or possibly till September. This is a bill that would likely go to either the Budget Committee, Jeff Merkley and I are both on that committee, or to the Finance Committee. There are Democratic majorities on each committee. We could get this bill out of the committee and onto the floor and then have a meaningful debate about how to do it. And that's what we're urging on our leadership. I don't have 60 votes for this today. That's what I would need. But we are working, Senator Merkley and I, to try to gain support for this idea, because this would affect Congresses of either party and presidents of either party. And I think anybody could look at it and see a situation in which, wow, my party might have the White House then, my party might have the majority in Congress then. This would be a good solution under those circumstances as well.
Another issue has resurfaced, your proposal for the authorized use of military force revision, or to a degree, retraction. We've talked about this a lot in the past. You do bring this up each Congress. Explain what you're arguing for and why it didn't happen last Congress when you were trying to remove these military force authorizations in Afghanistan and in Iraq.
Scott, I'm a constitutionalist on everything, but maybe especially on this part of Article 1. The Congress has the power to declare war, but Congresses generally don't exercise the supervision over that power in war, peace, and diplomacy, and instead abdicate to the president. Now, the bill that I have, and it's with Senator Todd Young, Republican of Indiana, we have 22 co-sponsors, 11 Democrats, 11 Republicans. We have well more than the votes we would need to pass it in the Senate, would repeal the Iraq war authorizations for the Gulf War, 1991, or the Iraq War authorization from 2002. Why would we do this? First, the wars are over, and Congress should just state that plainly rather than leaving an authorization on the book that could be used in a mischievous way by a president who wants to seize onto something as a justification for military action. Second, Iraq's no longer an enemy. When we went into Gulf War in 2002, we were battling against the government of Iraq. Iraq's now a security partner in the fight against ISIS, other terrorist organizations, and against Iranian aggression. And it's important to say to a partner, you're not an enemy. We now value the partnership. So I think this is something whose time has come. We have a broad, not only the numbers, but the ideological breadth of the co-sponsors on the Senate side and on the identical House bill suggests to me that now is the time when we can get this done.
What was the hurdle last few times you tried this? This was seemingly supposed to be voted on in 2021. What's the resistance?
Well, Scott, you're right. We got this out of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee with a bipartisan vote in 2021. And my leader, Senator Schumer, said we will get a vote on this on the floor. But he had some ideas about maybe making it part of the defense bill, which that was perfectly fine. But then at the end of 21 and at the end of 22, for a variety of unrelated reasons, we didn't do a full floor debate on the defense bill. And so there was no opportunity to offer it as an amendment. Where are we now? Senator Schumer remembered what he said to us, and he has said, look, I committed to get you guys a vote, and I want you to. President Biden has said he would sign this bill, and what's happening in the Senate right now, because of the slow pace of appointing committees at the start of this 118th Congress, there's not a big full legislative calendar right now. So we feel like if we act quickly, we can get this up before the calendar starts to crowd. The other thing, Scott, I'll mention is the 20th anniversary of the Iraq War. It began on March 19th, 2003. We're coming up to the 20th anniversary, and I think people are aware of that moment, and it's well past time that we take this step.
Busy day, busy week for you. Senator Tim Kaine, thank you for your time.
Always good to be with you, Scott. Thanks.
Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley officially announced she's running for president on Wednesday, but she may have some steep competition within her own party and may not be the only candidate from South Carolina. We'll hear from one of her former top aides after this break. You're streaming Red and Blue.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became this sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future.
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
Vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women.
What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done?
We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Scott McFarland. There are now 2 GOP presidential candidates vying for their party's nomination. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley announced her bid on Wednesday, making her the first to challenge former President Donald Trump. But the list of potential candidates is likely to grow. Let's bring in Rob Godfrey. He was one of Governor Haley's top aides. Pleased to have you joining us, Rob. What is Nikki Haley's lane? Assuming there's going to be many candidates, what's the lane she keeps?
Well, I think lane sometimes is an overused term when we're talking about candidates in a primary process. I think what you heard from her yesterday was a positive, upbeat, forward-looking message about a renewal of pride and hope for the country. It's one that certainly stood in stark contrast to the message that you hear from another candidate in the Republican primary race. And I think that was intentional. It's a generational argument that she's making. We have a candidate who's talking about the past, issues of the past, elections of the past, versus a candidate right now in the race until someone else jumps in, who's a candidate who's talking about a vision for the future, who's talking about things that people care about now, who's talking about what she'll do going forward, and not trying to relitigate grievances that people may have about previous elections.
Let's flesh out that point. Obviously, the other candidate is obviously her former boss, former President Trump. Has Nikki Haley, or you expect she will on the campaign trail, disavow baseless claims about the election and acknowledge that President Biden is the duly elected president, which Donald Trump insists is not the case?
Well, I don't hear a whole heck of a lot of people out there saying that President Biden is not the president of the United States. And in fact, most people
there's always that important point that they won't say he was duly elected. We hear a lot of sitting members of Congress who won't acknowledge that. Would Nikki Haley, in your mind, say that publicly on the stump?
Well, I mean, you'd have to ask her that, but I don't have any reason to believe she wouldn't say that he's the duly elected president of the United States, because there was a forum for those questions to be answered. That if people had questions about his election, I didn't have any questions about who was elected president. I think the process played out as it should. People voted on election day. Those votes were counted, and a winner was declared. And in that context, Joe Biden has been the president for the last 2 years. He'll be the president for at least the next 2 years. And so I think that's an issue that Republicans would do well to move on from in this primary and going forward. I can't speak for any members of Congress who have a differing view.
There's one other complication that immediately is known here. Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina, has flirted with a bid that would put 2 South Carolinians in the same primary. How would the former governor handle that dynamic?
I think she would celebrate Tim Scott's entrance into the primary. She's someone who's always believed that that primaries make candidates ultimately stronger, because the more candidates in a primary, the more robust. Senator Scott are friends. It's a real source of pride for anyone from South Carolina to see 2 people discussed as serious contenders for the presidency. Now we have one candidate in Governor Haley who's gotten into the race. We have another candidate in Senator Tim Scott, who is someone that people are speculating about getting into the race. We'll have to continue to see what he does, But as of right now, Senator Tim Scott remains one of the most compelling figures in the Republican Party. He talks about issues that people care about, from education reform to criminal justice reform. Those are issues that both primary and general election voters talk about. They're apolitical issues, and they're issues that we need to continue to hear from important voices on.
In Columbia, South Carolina, Rob Godfrey, thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
As we approach the 2024 presidential election, many are reflecting still on the January 6th insurrection and voicing concerns about a similar future attack. CBS News Homeland Security and Justice reporter Nicole Skanga spoke with Ken Weinstein, the DHS Undersecretary for Intelligence and Analysis, about preventative measures being imposed.
Under current DHS leadership, what would a response to a similar event look like?
The office has made tremendous strides in building its capability and its processes for ensuring that next time there is an indication of a January 6th type of attack, that it, along with its partners, is going to be poised to get the intelligence out in an actionable fashion so that other partners can act on that intelligence and head off the next January 6th kind of incident. That activity that we're better poised to undertake includes collaboration with more partners on a more regular basis.
Weinstein also said the department is seeing a recent increase in domestic terrorist attacks. The Homeland Security chief says they are mainly being driven by violent and extremist ideology. That does it for a busy day today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something